It was a chilly evening in the heart of the city. Amy, a 20-year-old college student with a penchant for late-night study sessions, hurried through the dimly lit alleyway that connected the university campus to her apartment building. She always took this shortcut to save time, but tonight, the shadows seemed to loom larger than usual. Amy's footsteps echoed softly against the damp pavement as she passed by a row of dumpsters, their metal sides glinting in the faint glow of a distant streetlight. The faint scent of garbage mingled with the cool night air, making her wrinkle her nose in distaste. She was almost halfway through the alley when she heard it. A soft rustle, like someone shifting their weight against the wall. Instinctively, Amy glanced over her shoulder. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw a shadowy figure leaning against the brick wall, partially obscured by the darkness. The figure straightened up as Amy turned, revealing a man in his mid-30s, wearing a worn-out leather jacket and faded jeans. He had a cigarette dangling from his lips, the ember glowing brightly in the dimness. Amy's pulse quickened. She didn't recognize this man, and his presence here felt wrong, unsettling. She tightened her grip on her backpack and quickened her pace, trying to ignore the chill that crept up her spine. Behind her, she heard the scrape of shoes against pavement, a slow, deliberate sound that matched her footsteps, step for step. Amy stole another glance over her shoulder. The man was following her, his eyes fixed on her back, with an unsettling intensity. Fear gripped Amy's chest. She had heard enough stories about late-night encounters gone wrong to know that this situation could escalate quickly. She needed to do something, but panic threatened to paralyze her. Taking a deep breath, Amy forced herself to keep walking. She needed to get out of this alley, to reach the safety of the well-lit street ahead. She repeated this mantra in her mind, her every step echoing louder in the confined space. As she approached the mouth of the alley, Amy dared another glance back. The man was still there, closer now, his expression unreadable in the darkness. She could see the faint glow of his cigarette, a small beacon of menace. Without thinking, Amy broke into a run. Her feet pounded against the pavement, the sound echoing off the alley walls. Behind her, she heard the man quicken his pace, matching her stride for stride. Panic surged through her veins, urging her to run faster, to escape this nightmare unfolding behind her. Finally, Amy burst out of the alley onto the brightly lit street. She stumbled slightly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Relief washed over her as she saw a group of people chatting near the entrance of a cozy cafe, their laughter ringing in the night air. Amy rushed towards them, her voice trembling as she explained her situation in hurried whispers. The group, sensing her distress, immediately surrounded her protectively. One of them, Jake, a tall, imposing figure with a gentle demeanor, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the alley entrance. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Amy nodded, her hands trembling at her sides. "There was a man in the alley. He was following me," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake exchanged a quick glance with his friends, his expression hardening. Without another word, he turned towards the alley entrance, his posture tense with readiness. Seconds ticked by like hours. Amy clung to the reassuring presence of Jake and his friends, her eyes fixed on the darkened alley entrance. She couldn't see the man anymore, but she could feel his presence lurking in the shadows, like a predator waiting for its chance. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a silhouette against the faint glow of the alley's distant streetlight. It was the man, his features obscured by the dimness, but his intent clear in the way he moved. Jake stepped forward, his voice firm. "Hey buddy, why don't you move along?" he called out, his tone carrying a clear warning. The man hesitated, his eyes flickering between Jake and Amy's group. For a moment, the tension hung thick in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Then, without a word, the man turned on his heel and disappeared back into the alley's darkness. Amy let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping with relief. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, tears of fear, but also tears of gratitude for the strangers who had come to her rescue. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Jake turned to her with a reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said gently, his hand resting comfortingly on her shoulder. Together, they walked towards the bustling main street, where the glow of streetlights and the buzz of late-night activity seemed to chase away the lingering shadows of the alley. Amy couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in her chest, but she knew she was safe now, surrounded by friends. Later that night, as Amy lay in bed, she couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind. She had always considered herself cautious, but tonight had been a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. She vowed to be more vigilant in the future, to trust her instincts, and to never hesitate to seek help when she felt unsafe. Reflecting on the incident, Amy felt a surge of gratitude towards Jake and his friends. Their quick thinking and unwavering support had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a moment of reassurance and solidarity. She knew she would never forget their kindness, or the lesson they had taught her about the power of community in times of need. Sarah dipped her brush into the cerulean paint, sweeping it across the canvas with practiced ease. The soft click of the front door signaled Mike's return from his evening shift at the cafe. They had exchanged only terse nods that morning after a petty argument about household chores, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Lost in the soothing rhythm of her painting, Sarah heard the door open earlier than expected. Mike often varied his schedule, but today's silence felt loaded with unresolved emotions. She continued working, half listening for the familiar footsteps that usually followed the door's opening. An hour passed before Sarah realized she hadn't heard Mike enter the studio to greet her. Setting down her brush, she turned towards the door, expecting to see him peek in with a reconciliatory smile. Instead, the door cracked open slightly, revealing a hand adorned with bright red nail polish gripping the brass knob. Startled, Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She yanked out her earplugs, straining to hear any sound that might identify the intruder. The door closed softly, as though the visitor had realized their mistake and retreated. Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations. Could it have been Mike's sister, or a neighbor inquiring about a package? She hesitated, then cautiously ventured into the living room, scanning for signs of the intruder's presence. The room was quiet, unnervingly so, except for a faint scent of lavender, a fragrance unfamiliar in their home. Sarah's rationalizations crumbled. Mike's sister lived out of town and had no key, and their landlady rarely visited without prior notice. A chill crept down her spine as she realized a stranger had entered their sanctuary. With trembling hands, Sarah retreated to the bedroom and locked the door behind her. She dialed Mike's number, her voice shaky as she recounted the unsettling encounter. Concern etched in his voice, Mike instructed her to stay put while he called the police. Minutes later, uniformed officers arrived and conducted a thorough search. There was no sign of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be missing, except for a small stack of photographs from Sarah's desk. They depicted moments from their recent vacation, capturing intimate scenes that now felt violated. The police found no fingerprints, no clues to the intruder's identity. Sarah and Mike changed the locks the next day, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something precious had been taken, a piece of their peace of mind. Months passed, and Sarah found solace in her art, losing herself in the vibrant swirls of paint that mirrored her emotions. Yet the memory of the intruder's silent intrusion lingered, a haunting reminder that safety could be shattered in the quietest of moments. As time went on, Sarah and Mike moved past the incident, but a sense of unease remained. They installed security cameras and became more vigilant, but the mystery of the intruder was never solved. Sarah often wondered about the person with the red nail polish and lavender scent, whose presence had unsettled their once safe home. It was a crisp autumn night when Mark, his girlfriend Emily, and their friend Alex decided to venture out for a late-night bite at a local diner. The diner, nestled on the edge of town, offered solace with its warm lights and familiar aroma of coffee and pancakes. As they entered, the bell chimed softly overhead, announcing their arrival. The diner was sparsely populated. A few late-night diners scattered among the booths, each lost in their own conversations. Mark, Emily, and Alex settled into a corner booth, weary at content after a long day. Across the room, a group of boisterous patrons caught Emily's attention. Among them, a man with a disheveled appearance and glassy eyes stood out. Emily's gaze lingered briefly before recognition dawned. She vaguely remembered him from high school, a distant acquaintance. The man, clearly inebriated, was engaged in a heated discussion with his companions. Emily nudged Mark discreetly, whispering, "That's Steve. I think I went to school with him." Mark glanced over, noticing Steve's increasingly agitated gestures. He leaned closer to Emily and Alex, lowering his voice. "Let's just finish up quickly and head out," he suggested, a note of caution in his tone. Their meal progressed in tense silence, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery and distant murmurs from nearby tables. Steve's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of the diner staff. Sensing trouble, the manager approached Steve's table, attempting to defuse the situation. Emily watched nervously as Steve's temper flared, his voice rising above the diner's ambient noise. She turned to Mark with concern etched on her face. "We should leave," she urged quietly. Mark nodded in agreement, signaling for the check. They exchanged glances with Alex, who was now keeping a wary eye on Steve and his friends. As they prepared to leave, Steve stumbled to his feet, his eyes locking onto their booth with unsettling intensity. "He knows we're watching," Alex muttered under his breath, a knot of unease forming in his stomach. With cautious steps, Mark led Emily towards the exit, keeping a close watch on Steve's group. They reached the parking lot uneventfully, or so they thought. As they approached Mark's car, a loud crash shattered the night air, followed by the sickening crunch of metal on metal. Emily screamed as Mark's car jerked forward, the impact throwing them off balance. Instinct took over as Mark quickly assessed the situation. Steve's pickup truck was now ramming into them, a relentless onslaught of metal against metal. "We need to get out of here," Alex shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. Mark fumbled for his keys, heart racing as he struggled to unlock the car doors. Emily dialed frantically on her phone, fingers trembling as she tried to reach someone. Anyone who could help. "Eric," Mark said tersely into the phone, his voice trained with panic. "We're being chased. We need your help." Eric, a childhood friend with connections in the local underground, responded with surprising calm. "Head towards the old warehouse off Route 12, he instructed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We'll meet you there." With Eric's directions in mind, Mark navigated through the city streets, adrenaline fueling every turn. The pickup truck followed relentlessly, its headlights casting long shadows across the deserted streets. "We're almost there," Emily whispered, her voice a mixture of fear and relief. As they approached the old warehouse, a sense of apprehension hung heavy in the air. Eric and a group of friends stood waiting, their expressions hardened with resolve. Mark pulled into the warehouse lot, tires screeching as he came to a stop. Eric approached, his gaze sweeping over the damaged car and the approaching headlights. "Stay close," he instructed quietly, his voice a stark contrast to the tension-filled silence. The pickup truck skidded to a halt, Steve's enraged silhouette visible behind the wheel. Eric's friends moved with practiced efficiency, forming a barrier between Mark's group and their aggressor. "You shouldn't have followed us," Eric stated calmly, his eyes locked on Steve's furious glare. Sirens blared in the distance, drawing closer with each passing second. The sound offered a semblance of reassurance, a reminder that help was on its way. Moments later, police cars screeched to a halt, lights flashing as officers poured out, assessing the scene with trained efficiency. Statements were taken, evidence collected, and Steve was swiftly apprehended, his reckless actions now under the scrutiny of the law. In the days that followed, Mark, Emily, and Alex recounted their harrowing ordeal, a tale of fear and resilience, a friendship tested and reaffirmed in the face of danger. Legal proceedings unfolded, revealing the extent of Steve's reckless behavior and ensuring justice was served. As they reflected on that fateful night, they found solace in their shared courage and the unwavering support of those who stood by them, a testament to the strength found in unity amidst adversity. It was a stormy night in the small town of Millwood, where 13-year-old Sarah and her cousin Jake were spending the weekend at their grandparents' old Victorian house. The wind howled through the eaves, and the creaking of the old house added an eerie backdrop to the evening. Sarah and Jake were in the attic, exploring dusty boxes and forgotten treasures, trying to find something to entertain themselves. Lightning flashed outside, casting fleeting shadows that danced across the walls. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the attic door. Startled, Sarah and Jake exchanged puzzled glances. Their grandparents were away for the evening, attending a late-night function in town. Who could be knocking at this hour? "I'll go check," Jake whispered nervously, taking hesitant steps towards the door. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched him cautiously approach. Jake peeked through the crack in the door and froze. "Sarah," he whispered urgently, "there's a man out there. He says he's a plumber and needs to check the pipes." Sarah's stomach tightened with unease. Plumbers didn't make house calls in the middle of a storm, especially not at this hour. She shook her head slowly. "No, Jake, something doesn't feel right." They heard the man shuffle impatiently outside. "Come on, kids. Your parents called me to fix a leak." His voice sounded strained and insistent. "We didn't call anyone," Sarah replied firmly, her voice trembling slightly. "Go away." Silence followed, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Sarah and Jake exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do next. Then they heard footsteps retreating down the stairs. "He's gone." Jake sighed with relief, but Sarah remained on edge. As they cautiously made their way downstairs, Sarah noticed something out of place. A muddy footprint on the carpet leading towards the kitchen. Panic gripped her heart. Had the man entered the house earlier? "We need to call the police," Sarah whispered urgently to Jake, who nodded in agreement. Just as Sarah reached for the phone, they heard a noise from the basement, a faint scraping sound, like metal against concrete. Their blood ran cold. Without a word, they crept towards the basement door, hearts pounding in their chests. Slowly, they descended into the darkness, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom of the stairs, they found the basement door ajar. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with old furniture and storage boxes. And there, huddled in the corner, was the man from upstairs, a sinister figure with wild eyes and a twisted smile. He held a rusty wrench in his hand, staring at them with unnerving intensity. Sarah and Jake froze in terror, their minds racing with fear and confusion. Before they could react, the man lunged towards them, his intentions clear. In a desperate bid for escape, Sarah pushed Jake aside and grabbed a nearby tool, a heavy hammer left behind by their grandfather. With trembling hands, she swung it with all her might, striking the man on the head. The impact echoed through the basement, followed by a sickening thud as the man collapsed to the floor. Sarah and Jake stared at him in disbelief, hearts racing with adrenaline. They'd wasted no time. With shaking hands, Sarah called 911, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained the situation. Within minutes, the police arrived, securing the area and taking the man into custody. As dawn broke over Millwood, Sarah and Jake sat together on the porch, still shaken but relieved. Their grandparents returned later that morning, unaware of the night's events. "It's over," Sarah whispered to Jake, a sense of calm finally washing over her. But as they looked towards the basement door, shadows seemed to linger, remnants of a night they would never forget.